I feel like I'm alone. I feel like I'm unknown to the world that's full of clones. My originality's focused on principalities broken. I'm loaning my heart and soul to the game that's scared to pay it back. And failure is a motherfucker. The strength to go on and believing in another sucker who don't see the vision in you. So you gotta work harder times two. Gotta make it do what it do. With the limited sources you have, your dream is still a finding motivation in you. And
Happy Gentlemen's Talk Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen. I am your one and only host tonight, DJ Micah B. The co-host couldn't be here, but hey, I am here. You know I do not miss shows, or I try not to miss shows. I think I've missed maybe one or two shows in the past year. Same thing with my man, Mr. GQ, other than citing his latest hiatus to the show right now. But it's all good and well. I know what's going on. He knows what's going on. The family knows what's going on. It is very well that he's taking his time to gather himself and get back. Speaking of Mr. GQ, the return is upon us. It is almost time. We do not have a concrete date. And if you read that, it says the return is upon us. And that is exactly what I am talking about. The return of Mr. GQ is upon us. Best damn co-host in the world. Miss him. He knows I miss him. Y'all know, I know y'all miss the chemistry between me and him and the topics that we have and the fun that we have on the show, because that's what we try to do. So, like I said, I am your friendly neighborhood DJ. We are going to dive in to one of my segments right off the rip. All right, so basically here in the crossover, for those of you that don't know how we do this or what it is, I take two unrelated things, find common ground, cross it into each other, build two, let's compile it, and let y'all know the insight, okay? So, centuries or eras, whatever you want to call it in sports, they get crossed up all the time, right? But none like WWE. WWE has a factor where they can always bring back past wrestlers and bring them into the fold, because some of them still retire young, or some of them still have some left in the tank because they keep themselves in such good shape. Also, as most of you know, it is scripted, not fake. Scripted. Somebody's bleeding, they're actually bleeding. It's not fake. But for the most part, the wrestlers themselves in the ring control the narrative or control everything that's going on. So let's talk about some WWE real quick, okay? Different eras teaming up. Different centuries of wrestlers teaming up. We've had some phenomenal team-ups from past centuries, or phenomenal matches involving wrestlers from different eras or centuries, whichever you want to call it. Decades, rather, not centuries, decades. So here we go. Let's start this thing off. At one point, John Cena and The Rock were feuding. Of course, as most of you know, The Rock left WWE right around 2004. John Cena was coming in and starting to take over and get his ascent into the GOAT conversation. The Rock came back at WrestleMania. 2 years in a row, they fought, they split. But the one thing we never expected was The Rock and John Cena to link up in a tag match, which was an amazing thing because it was two eras coming together and essentially teaming up and making a dream pairing for us. We can also point to Evolution. And the reason why I say we could point to Evolution was because, yes, Triple H was Attitude Era going into Ruthless Aggression. Batista and Randy Orton were both Ruthless Aggression. But Ric Flair started way back around in the 70s or 80s with WWE. And here we get in Evolution a epic team up of Ric Flair with people who actually made the Ruthless Aggression about 20, 25 years later from when he originally stopped wrestling or he left WWE for the most part. The Nature Boy with Evolution was absolutely epic. It is one of the craziest things we have ever seen. Even though he acted more as a manager, it was a dope team up. And then, of course, you know, Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair gave us that dream ending match that we all wanted. So that was another good team up. Recently, we have a WWE women's wrestler named Jacqueline. For those of you that don't know Jacqueline was very prominent, a very prominent woman wrestler in the 90s and early 2000s. Jacqueline is expressed interest in coming back, and I could only imagine if she comes back and is like a manager, maybe to Jade Cargill, and that would literally be 2 decades worth crossing over and linking up. And that would be something I would look forward to because I thought Jackie was highly underrated in her run. Obviously, we have the one from I think it was last year, probably now 2 years ago, when Stone Cold came back to fight KO. Something I never expected, but it was absolutely welcome. And Stone Cold and KO put on a great match. I think everybody enjoyed that crossover right there. So I say that to say this. We're going to take the different eras that we're talking about and we're going to put it into perspective in NBA terms. I'm going to look at the 5 worst teams in each Eastern and Western Conference. And I am going to pick one player that I could bring back in that team's history. Mind you, it's not bringing them back in their prime. It's bringing back the player they were when they were on that team. For example, if Cleveland was to bring back Shaq, they're not getting LA Shaq and they're not getting Miami Shaq. They're getting the Shaq that was in Cleveland at the closer to the end of his career. That got to team up for a couple of years with LeBron. I think 1 year with LeBron. So we're taking that player during the time frame they played with that team, and we're going to drop them in there. So let's start with the Eastern Conference, as some people like to refer to it as the Eastern Conference, but I don't think it's the Eastern Conference anymore. I think they're pretty much the NBA is pretty much leveled out, so I'm happy they're returning back to East and West in the All-Star game. So let's start with the Pistons. The Pistons is a tricky one because I don't necessarily know who I would put there that is going to turn the team around. I don't think the team is that good, but they also aren't a winning team, as in they don't know how to win games even when it's close, and they have a chance to close it out. More times than not, they lose. Most people would probably say they'd bring back Zeke. Totally understandable. I have no problem with y'all bringing back Zeke. And the reason why I think Zeke would teach that team how to win. I think Zeke would move Cade Cunningham off the ball, which would probably be a great need for them. And it also gives them a steady presence on the floor of somebody that can control the tempo. And Zeke is no slouch on defense either. He can hold his own on defense. I think I would lean with Zeke in that sense. Somebody might say, hey, what about Joe Dumars, the defender, the guy that was all defensive team, finals MVP in the second year they won the championship? Hey, I'm all for that too. Somebody might say Chauncey Billups. I would still go with Zeke because Zeke is the greatest player to ever wear a Pistons uniform. In my humble opinion, he is the greatest Piston of all time. Somebody might pick Ben Wallace because they think Ben Wallace might be great for the rebounding and the shot blocking and changing the identity, setting the tone. I think Ben Wallace would absolutely be a good pickup, but I don't think he moves the needle enough for them to actually win games. I would rather put Sheed in there because Sheed would fit more into this NBA and a stretched out because if most of you remember, Sheed was a really, really good stretch three-point shooter. He could put the ball on the floor. He could post you up. He could pass out the post. He could go off the dribble against his own counterparts, not really against guards and things like that. But if you put a power forward on him, she could give you the business. And that's straight up. He will give you the business. So I would vote either Zeke or Rasheed Wallace in my opinion. Moving on. The Washington Wizards. I had absolutely no idea who I'd put there for the Washington Wizards. I don't think Washington is going to be good for a very, very long time. I don't think anybody wants to play there. I think that team is just, they've been in flux since John Wall left. They had a couple of good years. They had the 1 year where I thought they could actually make some noise, and then John Wall gets hurt in the playoffs and he's out for the season. And I don't think John ever truly recovered and was healthy again for his whole career, or 100% healthy. He just kept on getting injury after injury. So, I mean, if I had to pick somebody, maybe a person that could come in right now and do damage, I guess I'd drop Gilbert Arenas in there from his time with the Wizards. I think those years when he had Caron Butler and Antoine Jameson, they had such a nasty chemistry. Gilbert was a monster during those 3 years where he got his big contract, was dueling Kobe. He was one of the best point guards in the NBA. I mean, Gil got buckets. So I guess for Washington, I would drop Gilbert Arenas in. If there was anybody else, maybe Wes Unseld. But I mean, that's going way, way back. And then he's probably the second greatest player to ever play in a Washington Wizards uniform. If you think Gil is the best to ever do it, because I have no problem with anybody saying him. We get to the Charlotte Hornets. Now, I want to remind everybody of the Charlotte Hornets history. They were in Charlotte. They moved to New Orleans. They started a new team that became the Bobcats. And then they became the Hornets once New Orleans switched to the Pelicans. And the reason why New Orleans switched to the Pelicans is because the Utah Jazz were the original New Orleans Jazz. Just a little bit of history for those people out there that don't know this whole whole anomaly of events. So for this topic only, I'm only going to do Bobcats and anybody else who's played under the Charlotte Hornet uniform since they became back a team in 2005. So the player I would drop in, oh, it's tough because they haven't really had a lot of good players since coming back as the Bobcats. I guess Gerald Wallace would be the guy I would drop in. Gerald Wallace was probably played his best in his whole career while he was in Charlotte. He was in his absolute prime. He made, I think, 2 All-Star games. He was a beast on defense. He was an athletic freak. So I think I'm leaning with Gerald Wallace. Another person that was really good for Charlotte when he was there was Steven Jackson. That Steven Jackson, Gerald Wallace team really did some damage. I mean, they did make it to the playoffs for 2 years. I mean, that's probably the best they have gotten in Charlotte around that time. Of course, Kemba Walker was a monster when he was in Charlotte as a Bobcat and then as a Hornet. I just think he doesn't move the needle enough, and he wasn't a good enough needle mover when he was there before. So yeah, I'm going to lean with Gerald Wallace, because I think Gerald Wallace being added to that team would give them the defender and scorer that they need to at least get up to like the 9-10 into the play-in. So we keep going. We're going to the Toronto Raptors. I think this one is pretty easy. I'm dropping Kawhi on the team. I am dropping Kawhi. Anybody pick DeMar DeRozan, have fun with it. But I mean, Kawhi is a better player, and I love DeRozan. But if I need to change if I need to change the complexity of a team for them to actually get to the playoffs or try to make a run to the playoffs, Kawhi Leonard is your guy. I thought that one was like the no-brainer of them all. And then going on to the Atlanta Hawks. I thought this one was pretty easy too. I'm taking Dominique Wilkins. Dominique was the absolute stud. He's forgotten in history because he played in the era of Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Isaiah Thomas. But nobody could ever forget that epic Game 7 duel that he had against Larry Bird. And I think he dropped 48. Larry Bird dropped 50. And it was an all-time classic duel. All-time classic duel. And if you've never watched that Game 7 between those two, you need to go back and watch it. So I am dropping Dominique Wilkins on that team. Also, Dominique had a scoring championship later on in like the 90s. Dominique was an absolute monster. So it sucks that people forget him and why he's lost in time. So let's go to The Western Conference. Starting off at the bottom, number 15, the Spurs. Absolutely easy. I'm dropping Tim Duncan on the team to change the complexity of the team. I think this is a no-brainer. I don't think anybody would pick anybody else. Maybe some of you might pick David Robinson because you feel like he would fit more in this era, which is perfectly fine because David Robinson was in his prime was up there with the likes of the way Tim Duncan ended too. David Robinson was one of 4 players in NBA history to have a quadruple double. So that tells you everything you need to know about David Robinson. I'm taking Tim Duncan. I think Tim Duncan is the greatest Spur to ever play. And I think Tim Duncan would immediately boost his team into around the 9 or 8 spot. Moving on to the Portland Trail Blazers. I am adding Clyde Drexler. Most of you would add Damian Lillard, which is perfectly fine. But might I remind you, Clyde Drexler made it to the NBA Finals twice. Okay? Clyde Drexler was Michael Jordan's toughest competition as a shooting guard in the 80s and 90s. Even though people seem to look over there and always say Reggie Miller, Clyde Drexler. And if you watch The Last Dance, you hear Jordan say, I'm not saying Clyde is not a threat. Clyde was a threat. But he took it personal that day, compared him to Clyde. But I'm absolutely taking Clyde Drexler and adding into this team, and I think Clyde Drexler is enough to pole vault them into the playoffs. And if you don't think so, I need you to go back and do some homework on how good Clyde was. By the way, this is not Houston Rocket Clyde. This is Clyde that was the best player on his team, and he carried them to the championship twice. So shout out to Clyde Drexler, man. I know you get lost in history a lot. Now we got the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis, for the most part, hasn't had a storied background as a basketball franchise. They started off as the Vancouver Grizzlies in the 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there. I can't remember the exact year. And then they moved to Memphis. So if I had to pick one player in Memphis history, and I'm being biased because this is my favorite Memphis Grizzly player of all time, I am going to drop Z-Bo. Z-Bo would absolutely bully players in this era. Nobody in this era will be able to guard Z-Bo. None. Z-Bo, I used to call him 2010 because he roll out of bed without stretching and give you 20 and 10 easily. Some of you might say Marc Gasol. I have no problem with that. Some might say Conley. No problem with that either. That grit and grind team is probably the best team that Memphis has had. But I would take Zach Randolph and throw him in here and let Zach Randolph, Debo, a couple of these smaller centers and smaller power forwards in this era. I think he would be basically unstoppable in the post because I don't think there's a single power forward in this league right now big enough to guard him. You got a couple of centers where I think they'd be able to guard him. Joel Embiid being one of them. Maybe Rudy Gobert because Rudy Gobert thrives when he's close to the basket. So maybe those two might be able to pull it off. I have more faith in Joel Embiid, but these guys like Karl Anthony Towns, Jared Allen might be a good one to face up against him. But for the most part, Jared Allen cannot score the basketball without help. Z-Bo would just put the ball on the floor and score over him. I'll take Z-Bo in that matchup any day. So I'm absolutely taking Z-Bo. And if you take Marc Gasol, that is perfectly fine. The Golden State Warriors is a very interesting one. And the reason why they're interesting is because I think they already have the guy most people would pick to drop on the team, which is Steph Curry. And Steph Curry is still there, and Steph Curry is probably having the best year of his career. So some people might go Rick Barry, can't go wrong with that. I'm not mad at it. I'm not picking him. But I mean, hey, I've never been a big fan of his game. I know he won them their first championship and things of that nature, but I'm not taking him. The person I'm actually taking is Baron Davis. I think if you put Baron Davis on the team, Baron Davis was a do-it-all. He was an athletic freak. People forget how athletic Baron Davis was, but he was an athletic freak of nature for his size. He could shoot. He could slash, he could dribble, he could break ankles. He's one of your favorite player. Baron Davis was do it all, and he was the guy on that We Believe team. Unquestionably the guy. He was a fantastic leader on that team. They did knock off Dirk Nowitzki, the number 1 seed, as they were the 8th seed. So I would take Baron Davis. Others, somebody might say, hey, what about Monte Ellis? What about all these other guys? That's fine, but I would definitely take Golden State Warriors. And then we get to my team, the Houston Rockets. Listen, I think out of all the teams on the bottom that we've been through, the Rockets probably has the most compelling list of players to choose from. Whether you go with James Harden, I wouldn't add James Harden, but hey, whether you go with James Harden, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tracy McGrady, Clyde Drexler, and we just talked about Clyde Drexler for the Portland Trailblazers. Steve Francis, when Steve Francis was in Houston, Steve Francis was a beast. And I think the Rockets could use a point guard. Calvin Murphy, who was back in the day, he was good. Even though he was a 5'10" guard, he would get to the basket and still do some ridiculous things. You got guys like Rudy T. You got the other half of the Twin Towers in Houston, Ralph Sampson. There's just Moses Malone, another one. I always forget Moses Malone played in Houston because it was before my time, but he definitely played in Houston. I mean, I think the guy I would absolutely drop, though, is probably, I wouldn't want to drop Olajuwon just because I think the Rockets are solidified at center with Saquon. So I would probably have to drop Tracy McGrady. And that's me being biased, too, because Tracy McGrady is my number 2 all-time favorite player ever. But I would drop Tracy McGrady on this Rockets team, and I think this Rockets team could do some pretty amazing things. Hakeem could get dropped on here and go back to his original position at power forward, and he could probably do some damage there too. But I'm going with Tracy McGrady because I think Tracy McGrady, his style of game would totally dominate this era, especially with no kind of real rim protecting centers. And I think he'd get to the basket at will. So there you have it, man. There's the crossover. I want to talk to you guys about something real quick. Something I didn't know. And it has everything to do with the person that my co-host refers to as the godfather of the NBA and the Miami Heat. And that is Mr. Pat Riley. So while digging through my Facebook, thinking about what I could talk about today, I ran across a post that listed Pat Riley's demands back in 1995 when the Heat signed him to be their GM and head coach, or president and head coach, right? Pat Riley had a list of demands that was absolutely ridiculous. Number one, he demanded $50 million, right? He demanded 20% ownership in the franchise. And when I say $50 million, that was over the life of his contract. It was more like $3 million a year. He also asked for 300-day per diem, and they did that. And mind you, for the time of this contract, this was considered one of the biggest contracts for a head coach and president in NBA history. And this is also one of the few times where a big contract like this included ownership in the team. And the Heat gambled it all on Pat Riley. And yes, this is one of the first cases of tampering as well. For those of you that don't know, the Heat did not ask the Knicks for permission to negotiate with Riley because Pat Riley was still with the Knicks as their head coach. But nonetheless, they swept it under the rug. And here we are today, after 1995. We are in year 20 or 19 or 20, however you want to perceive it. If you want to say 95, 96, or if you want to start just in 95 alone. Here we are today. And this has been one of the most fantastic signings of all time because Here we are, almost close to 25 years. Pat Riley is still there. The only difference is he is not the head coach. But the numerous moves, the moves to get Shaq, the savviness to get LeBron and Bosh with Wade. They've been to this, mind you, this was a team that was added in the 90s, and they already have 3 championships. They already have 3 championships. So that should tell you enough about how great of a sign it was for Pat Riley. They have 3 championships and 7 finals appearances. Not bad. Not bad at all. Pat Riley, the Don. It's not Bill Belichick like, because Bill Belichick obviously has more wins, and he's been with the Patriots probably around the same time, probably a couple of years, I think a year or two after he got with the Patriots, and he's had more NFL Super Bowl appearances than Pat Riley has NBA Finals appearances. But it is so close, and they played the same role for their teams. And the brilliance of Pat Riley being able to coach and then move up to being the president and also helping on the GM side as well. The brilliance that he showed, and he was also an NBA player. For those of you that don't know, he's spent his whole life in basketball. Some of us dream of spending our whole lives being in this sport that we all love. Some of us only dream that. Pat Riley has lived it out since he was a kid. Since he was a child, he's lived it out. It's amazing to see, and the Heat absolutely made the right call, and that was one of the best signings in NBA history. Pat Riley deserves more flowers than he normally gets, and he does get his flowers. He gets his flowers from a lot of people like me on podcasts and a lot of analysis and things of that nature. But make no mistake that Pat Riley could go down as the best to ever be a player, head coach, GM, president, all in one. I don't think anybody else, maybe besides Jerry West, can even touch that. And because Jerry West was a superstar as an NBA player, he's up there, right? So moving on, I wanted to talk one more thing today. It's going to be a short show, by the way, but I do want to get to one of my favorite segments on this show, coined by Mr. GQ. Coined by my partner, Mr. GQ. Let me see what he said. I still say the Patriots had a great O-line to keep Brady from getting hit back in the day. Of course they did. Of course, and also Brady releasing that ball pretty quick also has something to do with it. I think last time I saw the stat, it was like he was releasing in like 2 seconds, like, which is ridiculous. That dink and dunk thing worked for the Patriots at the end of his career, and people forget that Brady could actually throw the long ball in his younger days. He would throw it up the field. So yeah, I would have to give it up to that O-line at the beginning of his career for sure. So brought to you, well, created by Mr. GQ, brought to you by Gentleman's Talk, and narrated by me today, the Real Talk Session. Let's get into it. Mr. Bunnage, if you're still in the chat, man, I want you to chime in on this too. How we perceive wealth and how we value it, I feel like it's 2 different things when it comes to the Black community. I think we value wealth in different ways from person to person, but it seems to be around the young Black community, they very much value it in materialistic things. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's how you are, I don't see anything wrong with it. As long as you got everything together, I don't see nothing wrong with that. But I want people to understand there's a difference in being wealthy and having money. All right? A lot of us in the Black community are conditioned to perceive our wealth as having money and having to show it off, right? We go out and we get cars, we buy jewelry, we buy grills for those of us in the South and Texas and Louisiana and Florida. We buy grills. We get all this ridiculous stuff. Whereas I want to say a lot of people in other cultures are taught to not do that and go generational with it. Build for the generations after you. And I think part of that has to also do with in conditioning black people to feel that way. Because most of the time, whenever let's say an athlete gets a huge contract, they are taught to go back and take care of the past before they take care of the future. Right? So we as black people put our value in having money as far as in the now. Whereas being wealthy is generational. It's developing that long-term wealth. Whether you have to not wear the designer clothes, whether you have to not have cable right now. I mean, of course, most people just have internet these days anyway, but taking away things that don't matter, have a car that's already paid off and things of that nature. And I know we don't value we don't get a lot of generational wealth handed down to us, so we have to try and make it up ourselves. But we want to show that we have the money now in a sense. And it's unfortunate because I think when you obtain wealth, you have to invest in the long game, whether it be stocks, real estate, building a company, putting money in CDs in the bank, letting the bank use your money to obtain wealth. Things that we weren't taught and we have to go out and find out ourselves. So yes, as blacks, we do have a delayed start, and I think other cultures have a head start on that because they obtain a generational wealth. But I am here to challenge everybody today. Start trying to make generational wealth instead of living in your riches now. I said, being rich and having wealth is two different things. Being rich is having money in the now, being wealthy is having money in the long run. And I think most of us should play the end game because we want to leave our place when we leave back for our next generation up to where they don't have to start from where we started and trying for them to obtain that wealth and pass it on after. That is absolutely true. Some of us see it right now. And we want it right now. Right. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And it sucks because in order to gain wealth, this is not going to happen in the immediate. I mean, you see people win the lottery all the time, and in 2 years, they're broke. Right? All their riches are gone. They've lost their house. They've lost their cars. Because they didn't know how to stay rich and build on that rich and make it wealth. And I absolutely hate that. That has happened time and time again, especially to the black people that have hit the lottery. It sucks. It sucks to see. I mean, one of the hood's favorite movies is actually built on this concept. And it's Friday. I'm sorry, next Friday. It's next Friday. If you recall back in Next Friday, Uncle Elroy, Uncle Leroy, I always get his name mixed up. They won the lottery. And the mom had a heart attack. He remarried, this and that. But the biggest problem in the movie was they were about to get put out of their house. They're about to get evicted. And they didn't do their research because someone, if they did their research or if they looked around, could have told them, hey, if you buy this big house, you still have to pay taxes on the land and it's not yours. You're just renting it for the most part. You still have to pay taxes. And when those taxes aren't paid and that mortgage is not paid, we're going to kick you off your land. So you're behind in taxes and somebody come pay your taxes off and just get your house. And now, I mean, the riches was for a short period of time. Whereas wealthy, you play the long game, you start investing and you build over time. And I get it. I get what Earl said, we want it right now. And so a lot of us turn to different things where we can flaunt our money right now. And that specifically being all kinds of jewelry, fancy cars. We go on trips, which I'm not saying you can't go on trips. I mean, absolutely invest in some me time to go on trips because it's good for your mental health, which is, but you go out and you splurge on these trips. You go crazy. I am guilty of it too. I've came across a good bit of money in my life and I didn't build upon my wealth. I wanted to go travel and do the most. I wanted to go flaunt. Even my flaunting was more of shoes and clothes. It wasn't jewelry. I've never really been into jewelry like that. But I mean, hey, everybody has their own thing. But I think the challenge for 2024, like I said, please, please, please try and become wealthy. Start building your wealth now while we're still young. If you're in your 30s, it's not too late. If you're in your 40s, it's not too late. And if you're in your 50s, 60s, it doesn't matter where you are in life. You can always turn to anything and start building wealth. You can start commercial real estate at 60, and by the time you're 70, have a lot of money and be ready to retire, and you have so much put up for your next generation to start. Or you go back and you invest into your grandchildren and pay the way through college, and they start building it back up. Things like that. Life insurance is another thing that wealthy people have, and when they die, they leave back money. I mean, I'm just saying, not saying not to predict anybody's death or encourage them to die or anything for that matter, but I've seen it. I've seen a lot of people get crazy money off of life insurance policies. I absolutely have. Investing yourself with life insurance. You don't want to leave that kind of burden to the generations after you. That could help them, even if it's not all spent on your funeral. It could help them with something else. It could probably pay their first way through college, put a down payment on a house, anything. So 2024 is the year of wealth for us here at Gentlemen's Talk. Like I said, it's going to be a short show. I am going to be out today. That pretty much concludes it. I will see you guys Monday on Basket to Basket. Also tune in for the rest of the week. Tomorrow, we have PVT, Players versus Teams, with Zamora and Willie. Friday, we have the best damn football show, period, on Inside the Huddle. And then, of course, Monday, we're back here with me, Troy, and Moo, in Basket to Basket. If you have not seen my 1 hour special on the football playoffs this weekend, I want you to go check it out. From Monday on Martin Luther King Day. It was just a Martin Luther King Day special. I had a pop up. If you haven't seen it, I would love for you to go check it out. I made a lot of good points breaking down the football games and things of that nature, since I don't ever get to do that right now. Oh, Earl has commented. I want to see this before I get out of here. Right now is our downfall. There is not enough people in our generation or the one behind us thinking about the long run. You got two random people to ask random people, and do they have emergency fund? They say no. Like I told one of my buddies to let's start saving. A small goal would be to have a minimum amount to get tires for your car. Think about it. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's the point with saving. And that is the point with saving. You're absolutely right. Yeah, man, that's pretty much it for today. I would just like to take this time to say, go Texans. And I'd also like to take the time to say, how about them Cowboys? Joseph is somewhere pissed off, and I know it. I will catch y'all later. Earl Bunnage, appreciate you being in the comments, brother. I needed that one. And thanks for watching. I'm out.
Motivation in you and inspire the world to do what you can. If you love it, then fuck it, get through it. Mumble mentality activated. I waited for